Going the Other Way, a book by Billy Bean, and this is Lessons from a Life in and Out of Major League Baseball. We're on chapter 2, Myth of the Golden Boy. Up in the sky, go little Billy. Pleasures of free things, back to San Francisco. It's you against him. Best friend's girlfriend. David versus Goliath. Two boys sitting together. Santa Ana High is not your typical suburban public school. With its mission-style arches and Spanish-old roof, expansive lawns, and giant eucalyptus trees, it could pass for a monastery, at least from the outside. On the first day, Mom dropped me off in the parking lot in front of the school, which she had graduated from only 14 years earlier. She had apparently been applying for her biology lessons when I was conceived. So I guess I really was a product of the school. I know you're going to be the best, she said, kissing me on the cheek before driving off to work. Don't let anyone put you down. Knapsack slung over my shoulder, I walked through the double doors into a scene that was anything but Montestyle. I was shocked by the flurry of 3,000 kids of every conceivable color and nationality racing every which way. Endless rows of red metal lockers lined the halls. I spotted a few of my old Willard Junior High buddies and hunted for my homeroom among the maze of classrooms. As I listened to the teacher take roll, learning the names of my new classmates, I gazed out the windows. I was already far more interested in what lay on the other side of the glass. A building, indoor basketball arena that far outshone the rest of the school, and beyond that, acres of lush green playing fields. So you'll be leading off this year, right? One of my teammates from our old school said, seeing me staring out into the window. But I get to pitch and bat third, he added. We both smiled. Sports at Santa Ana were a huge cut above Little League and Pop Warner Football League. The best athletes from all over the area clustered at the school, and dozens of kids would vie for a few spots on the junior varsity and varsity teams. I drew a big red, yellow, and blue S in my notebook. There, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. Only one thing stood in the way of my dream of three sports stardom. My body, all 5 feet, 105 pounds of it. Even by ninth grade, I was still one of the smallest boys. I reacted the only way I knew, by outworking everyone else. I hit the bench presses like a boy possessed. My body may have looked like Jimmy Olsen's, but I was determined to sculpt it into Superman's. It's a good thing steroids didn't become popular for another decade or so. I was just saying no to drugs. And I'd never heard of Nancy Reagan. But I would have been sorely tempted by their promise of bulk. With its emphasis on brute force, football presented the biggest challenge. I'd played tailback for Pop Warner since 4th grade. But on the first day of practice my freshman year, a couple of weeks before classes began, I made a point of crashing through the line, throwing myself into the huge defensive lineman, like a child trying to push a refrigerator across the across the ice, my legs pumping furiously. I wanted to prove that I could gain the tough extra yardage. The freshman coach, Carl Rossetti, was a short, muscular guy whose gentle manner belied a fierce will. I begged him to let me run the ball. Come on, coach, give me a chance, I'd say. I know I can do it. I'm going to go all the way. He would shake his head and flash a bemused smile. During one practice later that year, varsity coach Tom Mice stood on the sidelines sizing up varsity prospects. Who is the crazy little guy causing all sorts of problems for the defense? He asked Rossetti. My desire far outstripped my 14-year-old ability. My best friend, Yale Riley, was the star. He stood 6'3" with a rocket arm. I looked up to him as though he were an uncle. That didn't stop me from secretly covering his starting quarterback job. I settled for the tailback slot. As I went to bed every night, I said a silent prayer. Please, God, make me as big as Yale Riley. I promise to be a good boy. Rossetti wasn't convinced of my future on the gridiron. He seemed certain about everything, so I struggled out to look very hurt when he said I should go out for the wrestling team after football season ended. Son, he explained as gently as he could, in wrestling, you compete against kids closer to your size. You could probably qualify for the 103-pound division. Wrestling? Was that even a sport? That's what Rugrats did on the front lawn or living room carpet when they were bored. I tried out for the team despite my misgivings. Even I realized that basketball would have to wait. To compete in the 103-pound division, I needed to drop 5 pounds. This was not easy for a growing boy with a workout regimen and a huge appetite for mom's spaghetti and meatballs. I went from having one of the biggest sack lunches in school to eating only carrots and celery, washed down by apple juice. Mom couldn't believe a 14-year-old could be so disciplined. But dropping below my already low 3% body fat, I made the varsity team as a freshman. I earned a varsity letter by beating everyone who tried out. But after a month, it became clear that dieting at such a young age wasn't beneficial to my health. It broke my heart to tell Rossetti I had to quit. But the next day, I was wearing a basketball uniform and playing on the freshman team. After the first practice, we went out for pizza, and I must have consumed an entire pie by myself. I was an odd combination of imp and adult, adolescent and athletic, boyish, but skilled enough to play with the best of my age level. The other kids didn't know what to make of me. After practice one day, I was in the locker room getting ready to shower. I was always shocked to see thick hair sprouting on the other kids' bodies like weeds in the spring, while mine remained smooth and underdeveloped. The locker room became traumatizing, and I always I always waited until everyone was done to find a shower. That day, 2 football teammates, Enrique Espinosa and Armando Gomez, arrived in the shower at the same time I did. Enrique was a nemesis. A couple years earlier, we'd vied for the same girl, so we were wary of each other. As they approached, it became painfully obvious I wasn't in their league, at least not yet. Go, Billy, go, they taunted as they surrounded me. Go, Bill, go, little Billy, with his little dick. The boys repeated the refrain over and over. As other kids looked on, joining the derision, I realized there was nowhere to hide, nothing to say. I just stood there shivering, covering myself with my hand, ducking under them. I darted for my locker, dressed, and raced home as fast as I could. The hazing didn't intimidate me for long. It put a chip on my shoulder the size of Texas. I determined to bury those oafs on the field. The desire to be liked was one of my defining characteristics, but my need to please my coaches bordered on the pathological. And looking back, it seems pretty obvious it was a vehicle for winning approval. I'd been denied by my biological father. By senior year, I'd become close to Coach Meese, which I thought walked on water. After practice one day, the coach's oldest daughter, Paula, stopped by for a visit. She was the head cheerleader of our rival high school at Modena. I noticed that she was cute, funny, and looked an awful lot like her father. I always had to have a girl by my side, and she fit the bill. It caused a stir when I asked Paula out. My teammates thought I was mean, thought I was insane to get involved with the coach's daughter. There were plenty of pretty girls in my own school, and I can see how, and I can see now that I was using her subconsciously to get closer to her coach. Paula was a cautious daddy's girl, and I pressured her to fool around before she was ready. She stood firm. So I did what any self-respecting teenage boy would do. I kept right on cajoling. Late one night, senior year, we were in my 69 Volkswagen in the hills, just above the Mice family home in Orange. We were making out, and before long, I'd stripped down to my underwear. The cat's best friend's girlfriend, the car's, my best friend's girlfriend, was blasting on the stereo. The windows had fogged up, and we were lost in full lip lock. Enrique Espinosa, eat your heart out, I thought. Then a loud knock on the driver's side interrupted our bliss. I rolled down the window to find a policeman staring at us. Paula turned down the music as I fumbled with my jeans. Get the hell out of here and get her home, the cop ordered. We drove home in silence. Shortly before we arrived back at her place, we looked at each other and cracked up. What could have been a nightmare had turned out to be a hilarious moment. Coach Mice was a football legend in the area as well as a born-again Christian who frowned on premarital sex. We'd narrowly averted disaster. Even though we dated the entire year, we never made the mistake again. When I realized I was going away to college, I lost interest in dating and stopped seeing Paula. A few weeks later, before I left town, I stopped by the house to say goodbye. Mrs. Mice jumped all over me right there in the front yard. Billy, you really disappointed me, she said. How could you be so insensitive to Paula? All she does is cry about how you treated her. What could I say? She was right. Girls took a backseat to sports. Home became a place to eat, sleep, zip through my schoolwork, and then race out the door to the next practice or game. Who Buoyed by a great performance, I would announce to Mom that I was going to lead the football team to the championship or make it to the major leagues when I grow up. That's nice, dear, she would say. She thought these were the empty boasts of a precocious child, and she underestimated just how rapidly I was developing. She loved me for what I was, who I was, and she would have supported me whether I wanted to be a cop or a quarterback, though I have a feeling she would have preferred the former. Her indifference made me more determined to those her to show her I could do it. Her new husband, Ed, 6'3", mountain of a man, and a former high school football player, took my enthusiasm for far more seriously. He came up with what soon became my mantra of competition. Just remember, young man, he'd solemnly say to me, it's you against him, and you're better. It felt great to have his backing. After I got over my initial jealousy, Ed and I bonded. I think my negative feelings toward him had more to do with departures than arrivals. If he arrived, it meant he would leave. That had always been the pattern, after all. When practice ended, I would shower and head home, looking forward to more competition. As soon as I walked in the front door and kissed Mom as she was cooking dinner, I was challenging Ed to a game of HORSE, or a free throw shooting contest in the driveway. We used the metal hoop Ed had secured to a plywood board over the garage. The loser drew dinner wash-up duty. At first, Ed won most of the time, and with 8 people in the house, I was up to my elbows in greasy plates. But after a while, I improved. I learned to let the faces of the laces of the ball spin softly off my index finger exactly the same way every time, increasing my accuracy. Before long, Ed was complaining good-naturedly about spending some time in the kitchen with his wife rather than out here with me. Those hours in the driveway paid off when my basketball coach entered the team in the California Interscholastic Federation National Free Throw Competition. At first, we moaned and groaned about having to participate, arriving at the Santa Ana College at the Santa Ana College gym one Saturday morning. I waited for my mom for my name to be called. There were dozens of players from around the city, and I figured I would shoot my 25 free throws and go home. I didn't even get a chance to warm up. After burying my first shot, I went on a roll, making 23 out of 25. About 30 minutes later, I was informed I'd won. I was to show up at junior college the next Saturday for the second round. Sniffing victory, I practiced all week. I sunk 24 of 25 that day, and I and I hugged home another trophy. Next up was the qualifying round for the state title at Cal Poly Pomona College. A crowd of family and friends gathered to watch me shoot it out against 6 other guys. Since I'd had the highest percentage so far, I was slated to go last. One puny kid made 22 out of 25. Worried I had to be perfect, I missed 3 of my first 10. For a tie, I needed 15 in a row. I made the first 10 without blinking, but then started to get shaky. I managed to down the next 5, even though I caught a piece of the rim a couple of times. Now we were to a stage 3 shootout. We flipped a coin, and the other boy went first. He made his first 4 in a row. As he readied himself for the decisive shot, cries of "Miss, miss, miss" rose from far up in the stands. It was my brother Jason, only 3 years old, screaming. The crowd laughed at his youthful squeals, but the kid, distracted, rimmed out his 5th shot. I took a couple of deep breaths and tried to visualize the hoop in my driveway, one at a time. Ed could say to me when I hesitate and become anxious. So I did, swishing the 5th one to become a state champion. Jason got the assist. Winning the state title meant that Mom, Ed, and I got a free trip to San Francisco, where we stayed at the elegant Sir Francis Drake Hotel. It became clear there was more to the world than Santa Ana. We jumped in a cab for a celebratory tour of the city. I couldn't believe how many buildings they could fit onto a street. I had no idea that cities could be built on hills. It was my first taxi ride, and soon we were heading down a wide, bar-lined street called Polk, right in the heart of the city. As I peered out the windows through the fog, I spotted 2 young men sitting at a bus stop. I froze. Were they holding hands? My inclination was to ask Mom and Ed, what's going on with those guys? Then I stopped myself. I just gazed at the couple until they were out of sight. I sat silently in the car until we returned to the hotel. Is anything wrong, Billy? Mom asked. Everything's okay, Mom. When do we get to come back to San Francisco? Going into my senior year, the baseball team wasn't supposed to do much at all, but we ended up taking the California Interscholastic Federation AAA title at Dodger Stadium. I was an all-state first team selection and the MVP of the Orange County All-Star Game. Despite my passion for football, it was the gridiron that served as the ultimate proving ground, the test of my mettle. After starting out as a 103-pound tailback in my freshman year and then a 130-pound defensive back who took a pounding every game, by senior year, I had grown 6 inches and put on 35 pounds to a height of 6 feet and a weight of 165 pounds. I finally owned the body I needed to match my expectations. I still had my eye on the coveted starting quarterback job. I'd spent the summer before senior year, when I wasn't playing baseball, working on my passing. Ed set up a tire in the backyard, and I would fire the ball through it, often on the run from imaginary defenders. Coach Mice sent a receiver, Rod Harmon, and me to a passing and receiving camp for high school students. Rod, as lithe as his name suggested, was the defending league sprint champion in the 100 and 200 meters. I'd float a pass down the field and Rod would run under it. Beating out Yale and several more experienced players, I landed the prize starting quarterback job. Early in 1981, we faced Edison High School, the #1 ranked high school football team in the nation. This was the ultimate challenge. It was all anyone spoke about all week. And our pep rally turned the gym into a Thunderdome. When we arrived at Orange Coast College Stadium, the stands were overflowing with 10,000 fans. The cheerleaders who lined the field couldn't even hear one another. The stadium featured a long walk from the locker rooms high above the field down a winding ramp to the field. We were chomping at the bit when the Edison Chargers strutted down for warm-ups in a single file. They seemed to be nothing special, but then we realized they weren't even wearing shoulder pads. This team could have been the USC Trojans. It was David versus Goliath. I needed to do something to pump up the team. Early in the game, a linebacker hit me late after I was out of bounds. I jumped up and slugged him across the helmet. Before long, there were 10 players in a pile, fist fighting. In the second half, an Edison player dove onto the right knee of our best defensive tackle, Matt Vest, whose athletic career ended on that play. Enraged, we mounted a comeback. I looked up with Rod Harmon on a couple of long touchdown passes, but we fell short. 42-28. Goliath had won. But like the biblical monstrosity, they were ugly. We considered ourselves with the notion that it was a moral victory, but everything paled compared to Matt's injury. I lay on my pillow that night, nursing the bruises that dotted my body, and replaying the game in my head. As usual, I fixated on my mistakes. If only I had seen Sal Sugar Falcon, my longtime buddy in Studley slap back, open down the sidelines. That would have given us another score. If only I'd been there to lead the interference when that bully jumped on Matt. I still saw myself as the little guy who had to fight for everything. Being a late bloomer kept me hungry and disciplined when a lot of guys would have relaxed and enjoyed the status. I simply didn't allow myself to feel the pressure to fuck up, fall down, clang the bell on the rim, off the rim, or strike out. Sports were my ticket out of Santa Ana. Although I lacked insight into why I wanted to escape that sunny enclave, the only home I'd ever known, athletics focused my energy at an age when most kids are simply looking to have a good time. Even I couldn't deny that I played well in front of all those people, surpassing everyone's expectations. It dawned on me that perhaps one day I might actually be capable of accomplishing something special under the bright lights of a far bigger playing field. Off the field, I hung out with a close group of buddies: Yale, Brad, Tina, Kenny, Johnny, and Jeff. We spent quite a lot of time hanging around the shimmering blue pool at the home of another buddy, John Ostberg. These guys were like brothers. Love and romance were mysteries. I'd always pursued sex with girls because that's what boys did, or at least that's what they said they did. Other than sports, sex was the main topic of conversation. Since I always had a girl by my side, the guys egged me on. Go for it, Billy, they would say, living vicariously through the one they assumed got all the girls. But then one clear night, my pal Steve Bradley and I spent a night out drinking. We ended up at Ostberg's house, and we were getting ready to go home. Steve and I sat in his car in front of the house. He and I always trusted each other. And on this night, we really, really opened up. We must have talked until 4 o'clock in the morning. Steve didn't play competitive sports, so it felt great to be able to leave the rough guy banter on the sidewalk. I told him about my fear of screwing up on the field and my doubts about my athletic future. It feels great to be able to tell you all of this stuff, how I really feel about this stuff. Stevie, I said, I feel like we could be brothers or something. You're the only guy on the football team who doesn't care that I'm not on it, he said. It's cool you don't give a shit about that stuff. You're not stuck up like the others. It wasn't exactly your everyday verbal interaction between high school boys. After a while, a kind of calm descended upon us. The windows fogged. I sensed that I was becoming nervous and my heart was racing as though we were boy and girl on the verge of a first kiss. Suddenly, spotlights flooded the dark car. Police ordered us out. To our shock, the cops actually pushed us against the car and slapped cuffs on us. Had they read my mind? How could two boys just sitting in a car together be a crime? It turned out they only thought we were preparing to rob a house. Steve had been flipping the car lights on and off when another car would happen by so they wouldn't accidentally ram into us. One of the Osberg's neighbors had seen the blinking lights and dialed 911. I pleaded with the officers to knock on John's door so that his parents could vouch for us, and they finally relented. We got a stern warning. Thank God we didn't have any alcohol in the car. For weeks afterwards, wherever I saw Steve, I wondered where our conversation might have led that evening, only to stifle the thought. I didn't want to know the answer. I told myself I had just had my way too much beer. It would take years for me to figure out that athletic stardom doesn't make reality earlier, only easier to ignore. The standards I set proved increasingly difficult to live up to, especially in my private life, where desire would find a way to intrude on the carefully tailored fantasies I'd created. Superman could go 0-4. Batman couldn't throw interceptions. The pressure was so great that sometimes a great game no longer made me happy, only relieved. Well, at least I didn't let my family and friends down, I would tell myself. At least my self-image too is still intact for one more day. I grew up as Billy Beane, the ball player. Billy Beane, the athletic wonder kid. Even though I wasn't from a baseball family, stardom had been my dream since the age of 8. I believed that if I was a good player, then I was a good person, and everything else would fall into place. For a straight A student, the good-looking quarterback of the football team, the heavily recruited outfielder with the sweet swing, what could possibly go wrong? That is chapter 2. The book is Going the Other Way by Billy Beane with Chris Bull. These are lessons from a life in and out of Major League Baseball. Join us next time on Beyond the Rainbows books when we go into Leon Land, chapter 3. Until then, have a good evening.